Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the 62% Halo charity event as part of the Sexual Awareness Week this week. I'm absolutely delighted to host the webinar today to talk about sexual abuse and sexual awareness, because the only way that we can work to address some of the issues is to work in partnership. I'm absolutely delighted to host the event this afternoon. You've got us for an hour and a half, so I'll just go through some housekeeping to begin with. If you can keep your cameras off and mics muted, we'll make sure that the chat facility is open for any questions that you may have for any of the speakers. There will be a question and answer session at the end of today, I believe around 2:40. So please get those questions in and we can ask them to the panelists later on in the afternoon. We also have an opportunity for you to donate to the Halo Project. If you text Halo Project to 70085, it'll be great. Even if you donate £1, every penny goes directly to our survivors to ensure that they're safe, protected, and have the basic essentials that they can have, especially in this pandemic. Every opportunity to fundraise, we do try. But as I said, today is really about doing what we can as part of the Halo Project, bringing partners together to ensure we raise awareness on sexual violence. We have some brilliant speakers, and I would really ask you to write some questions in the chat facility so that you can put them to the panelists later on this afternoon. We were thinking of what to do for Sexual Violence Awareness Week, and there's a range of initiatives that we do with our university students, which you'll hear later on. And we're delighted to have Halo Hubs set up, which my colleague will tell you all about. But this event really comes on the backdrop of a national consultation led by Revolt and the Student Room, which I'm sure you'll agree has some stark findings in there about how sexual abuse affects the student population. Now, if I was to tell you that if you look at government statistics, 1 in 5 women will have experienced sexual abuse. But actually, when you look at some of those statistics that have been presented through this extremely important, relevant report, 62, hence the name, 62% of students say they have experienced some form of sexual abuse. Now, that in itself tells you that that's just the tip of the scale, because if you go down and look at the statistics within the report, only 2% felt confident enough to report the abuse. Now, that should really raise huge alarm bells. Students go to university to experience a learning environment which puts them instead to reach their potential and to build themselves up for a better, stronger life that they can achieve their aspirations. What students do not go to university for is to be subjected to sexual abuse. And we cannot do this in isolation. Today, as part of the Sexual Violence Awareness Week, we're calling upon all those organisations on the call today and the universities to join us in working on a campaign which will be leading up to International Women's Day, which is on March the 8th, and it's about how you can get involved. So we're delighted to share an introduction to the launch of our charter in March, and what can you do as an organisation, whether you're a university, whether you're an individual, or whether you're part of an organisation. What can you do to sign up to the charter that will provide an action plan? And it's about taking personal responsibility. So at the Halo Project, we set the programme of work up since 2011. We have had thousands of victims and survivors who have sought the support and the safety because of their experience of sexual abuse. And the more we talk about it and the more we share actions to improve their journey, the more we can do to combat it. And my absolute aim today is to elevate the status of victims and to ensure perpetrators are held to account. So that's the main objective for today. How can we do this in partnership? We can ensure that universities have very clear signposts on where victims can go to report the crime. and it is a crime, but we can also go one step further. We can ensure that universities and workplaces create a zero tolerance to sexual abuse. In Wales, my role as a national advisor to the Welsh Government on their legislation, which is Violence Against Women, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence, which was introduced in 2015, Wales have embarked, working with their public bodies, on national campaigns. And one of the most important campaigns that is currently running is the issue around sexual violence. But one of the campaigns that is so important and relevant even today is a campaign called Don't Be a Bystander. You don't have to be a victim of sexual abuse. You can hear about it. We all know somebody who's experienced sexual abuse. And what we need to do is we cannot become bystanders. If anybody on campus has experienced sexual abuse, we should be able to speak on their behalf. So this is the message that's sent out today. You will be hearing from individuals and you will be seeing video and you will be listening to discussions about real lived trauma. What I would say to you all, if there is any support that you need or you have been affected by any of those discussions, information or visuals, please contact us. We will contact you and make sure that you are spoken to in a professional manner. We have had training and it would be all done in confidence. So please, if you are affected by that, self-care is so important. Please get in touch with us through the private chat function and we will be able to take you through and support you in anything that you tell us. It will be kept as confidential. I'm really pleased to see we've got our CPS partners and we've also got our policing partners. So we will work with you, but more than anything, we will trust and believe and respect what you're telling us. So please be assured you have my absolute guarantee that we will treat you with the respect that you deserve. So, as I said before, we cannot do anything in isolation. The Halo Project prides itself in its partnerships with our public bodies and our partner voluntary agencies. And I'm absolutely delighted about the engagement with university hubs, but I don't need to tell you about that. We've got some great advocates and our Halo Hub project directors and staff there. Hannah, Pintana and Charlotte will be speaking to you about what is a Halo Hub within the university and how can I get involved. There's some fantastic work that's currently going on. Unfortunately, those of you who do know me, is I can probably take up the hour and a half myself, but that's not what we're here to speak about today. We're here to learn, and that includes myself. We've got some great speakers. What I'd like you to do is think about some of the questions you want to ask us, put them in the chat facility, and this will be your opportunity to ask many of the talented people we have on our panel. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm committed to ensuring that victims are supported wherever they're presented, even more so our future generations. So I'm delighted to be part of this very important and significant event in the week of raising awareness on sexual violence. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Tamara, who's going to be presenting the work of the fantastic student hubs. Tamara, over to you.
Thanks, Jasmine. Okay, so I'm just going to get my PowerPoint up now. Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you, Yasmin, for that amazing introduction for the event today. So to begin with, I just wanted to tell you a bit about the Halo Hubs that we have here at the Halo Project, and we based this event around them today as well. So my main role here at the Halo Project is to deal with the Halo Hubs. We have existing hubs in Northumbria, Sunderland, Durham, Teesside and York St John universities. And I basically support the students during their time volunteering for us. And I also work on creating new partnerships with universities so that we can eventually take the Halo Hubs national. So the Halo Hubs are essentially student campaign groups. They are formed through partnerships with universities, ourselves, and their student populations. Their main aim is to increase awareness of the illegal cultural harms on their campus, including forced marriage, female genital mutilation, and honour-based abuse. As well as this, though, they also act as a safe space, so students at risk or experiencing abuse, especially those from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds, can come forward, they can seek support, and they can be signposted to specialist services such as Halo. So as well as them creating a conversation of these hidden harms on their campus, they also do a lot more than this. They provide students with an opportunity to increase their personal and professional development. This can further enhance their CV, their skill set, and in turn their employability as well. So essentially though, creating conversations is really only the first step of what these Halo hubs can achieve. They can enable change and they can shape mindsets of the UK's next generation of professionals. In turn, this will lead to hub student volunteers being influencing their future networks, their future chosen fields. This can help improve workplace policies, and it will also ensure that more appropriate, sensitive support is available to victims and survivors of abuse. So essentially the aim of today's webinar is to break the silence around student sexual violence. We've found through working with the students in our Halo hubs that sexual violence is especially prevalent on university campuses. This is also supported by the research from Revolt sexual assault that Yasmin just referenced there, which this showed that 62% of students do experience sexual violence whilst at university. So today we wanted to raise awareness of this with the help of the speakers that we have. So today we're going to hear from Georgia Corbett. She is the co-founder and co-chair of Not On My Campus UK. Following on from her, we'll hear from a survivor called Ashwaya. She is currently a final year student at Durham University. We'll then hear from Dr. Geetanjali Ganguly, who is an associate professor at Durham University in the Centre of Research in Violence and Abuse. We'll then turn to our Halo hubs and speak to some of the student volunteers who are in them currently. So we have Hannah, who is a second year undergrad student studying law at Durham University. And then we'll have Pintana, who is a second year undergrad studying tourism and events management at Northumbria University. And then we'll conclude with Charlotte, who is a third year undergrad studying religion, philosophy and ethics at York St John University. And then, like Yasmin went over after this, we'll have a question and answer session. So as we're going along, feel free to drop any questions that you have in the chat facility and we'll go over them at the end. So to get started, we're going to go to Georgia Corbett, who is the co-founder and co-chair of Not On My Campus UK.
Hi, thank you so much, Tamara, for the introduction, and Yasmin, of course, as well, and for facilitating this event. I'm just going to get up my PowerPoint now, so please bear with me. Can you see that, Tamara?
Yes, I can see that.
Okay, fab. Okay. I can't see myself, so that's probably for the best. I'm going to turn these off at the bottom. Okay, so this presentation is going to aim to educate you all a bit more on sexual violence on campus and some of the ways that people have fought back against it as well. I will be going through this quite quickly, but I'll make the slides available to Halo Project after this for anybody who would like more information, and obviously there's the questions at the end. As it's been repeated multiple times, I am the co-chair and co-founder of Not On My Campus UK, and I've included both the network communication and my own communication there, along with our website. What is Not On My Campus UK? I thought I should probably address who I am, where I come from first. The aim of Not On My Campus UK is to be a student collective that provides a hub for activists and survivors from various groups fighting sexual violence and or supporting survivors on their own campuses. As a network, we bring together representatives and students from both NUS and non-NUS affiliated universities, and those who to provide a platform to work together to support students, including on joint projects and campaigns, both uplifting their own and working nationally and collaboratively, working to tackle sexual and domestic violence through various methods, including social media campaigns, educational events, etc. We try to provide support and debriefing sessions for those who are doing student campaigning and fighting to end sexual and domestic violence on campus, of course. We were created to answer what we felt was a need for collective action, solidarity in the fight against campus sexual violence. A lot of what I was experiencing while running my own on-campus society was feeling that I was shouting into the void a lot of the time, and that these issues were so personal to the people that had experienced them that it was actually quite difficult to get people to kind of course, to take their trauma and try and push continuously, as the case often is, to get small changes. But we began as a collaboration group between, I think, 5 different universities in 2018, and then since have developed into a national hub to provide support both to each other and to allow us to uplift voices more widely. It's also worth noting that in 2018 was when the Warwick group chat, for those of you who are familiar, if not, I'll be touching a bit more on that later, when this occurred. And on my own campus, as well as campuses local to me, there was a big feeling of we want to stand in solidarity with this experience that's happening. And however, we couldn't. We had no means to communicate between each other. We didn't know who to be contacting, who were the organisers on those campuses, and who would be those kind of contacts. So that was the kind of basic idea of why we brought together Not On My Campus UK. What do we do? I've kind of touched on this a little bit, but I'll touch on it again briefly. We support setting up societies and provide linked specialist services. So linking those who want to start their own groups to groups like Halo Hub, so that they can make their own Halo Hubs, groups like Rape Crisis, etc. We facilitate training and educational events. For example, we ran a national convention last year, which ran over 5 days with 18 different organisations. We run and support local and national campaigns, both those that look at kind of wider society in the ways it affects on-campus sexual violence and looking directly at campus sexual violence, both on individual campuses and kind of the wider the higher education sector. We try to provide support to student campaigners, so we have debriefs as well as opportunities to engage with our committee for advice and support during your own times advocating. We provide up-to-date news via our website and newsletter, so you can sign up to that via our website, which is notonmycampusuk.org. Okay, so I won't be able to touch on all of the facts that surround this, mainly because there's a lot of studies. Revolt sexual assault is the data that's being used for this particular event, which it was done in collaboration with the Student Room a couple of years ago, and very poignant. NUS have also done work with 1752 looking at staff-student relationships, which I would strongly recommend having a look over. NUS Women's Campaign have done studies such as Hidden Marks, which I will be expanding briefly on. Changing the Culture was a report that was brought out by Universities UK in 2014, 2016, quite a while ago, and since have had 2-year reviews. So those are worth reading as well to kind of see what the official advice has been for campuses and kind of comparing to your own campus how much of this has actually been implemented. I found that quite eye-opening because some of the recommendations have been around for, you know, heading towards a decade now, and the progress on them can at times feel quite frustrating. So it's good to know that there's official advice coming from the higher ups to say this should be the case. And also there was a survey done by the Brook looking at sexual violence on campus as well. This is not an exhaustive list. I'm sure there are others out there, and there's also individual studies done on certain campuses, but these are quite a good overview of the situation. So NUS Hidden Marks, just want to touch on what the key findings of this was. So 1 in 7 survey respondents experienced serious physical or sexual assault during their time as a student. 68% had been a victim of one or more kinds of sexual harassment on campus. So the data we're looking at today is 62%, but then NUS found it went as high as 68. So the reality is this is a very high number either way. And the fact that this has kind of been replicated at this kind of a high statistic is both concerning and validating for the existing data. 12% of respondents have been subject to stalking, more than 1 in 10 a victim of serious physical violence. This would include both rape and domestic abuse. 7% have been subject to serious sexual assault, and the assaults mainly take place in people's homes. And 1 in 10 victims reported that they were given alcohol or drugs against their will before the attack. There is a lot of data, and the actual study is really accessible, really well laid out, and has key findings at the start of each section. So if you would like to know a bit more on that, it's very easy to find. Just look up NUS hidden marks. Revolt sexual assault. So this is a study that has been pulled on for this particular session. So I quite like this graphic because it shows exactly what it would look like if there were that many students experiencing this experiencing sexual violence while at university, what the scale of it actually looks like if it was a lecture hall, was what was in my head. And it is overwhelming. 62% have experienced sexual violence, and this figure rises to 70% of female respondents. 48% have experienced sexual assault, and 73% of respondents with a disability, where 54% have experienced sexual assault. Only 1 in 10 reported their experiences to the University of Police. Only 6% reported their experience of sexual violence to the university. And this, I think, is really damning. Only 2% of those experiencing sexual violence felt both able to report it to the university and was satisfied with the reporting process. So even where there is an awareness of where to go to report, which in my own experience has been not always the case. A lot of the time people don't know where to go if they did experience sexual assault and what reporting pathways are even available to them. Of those people who do know that kind of information, only 2% were satisfied with the process, which I think speaks to the wider need for improvements and a much more transparent system, so that there isn't such so much failing, in my opinion. Okay, so this, I put a non-exhaustive list because I feel like I could write an endless essay on this. But why is it so pervasive on campus? Obviously, a lot of these issues, I've tried to focus in on things that are specific to campus, but obviously there are things that society itself has anyway, and these are just amplified while on campus. So obviously when you arrive at university, for predominantly people arrive for their undergraduates around 18, 19, which means that you have a drastic increase in your independence and your freedoms, which sadly put people at more risk. There is an increased amount of lad culture with things like sports clubs and group chats, as we've seen. Drinking and drugs, an increased access to these and an increased peer pressure to partake in them. Lack of support systems. So those of you who might have come from I know in my case, I came from a high school I'd been at for the last 7 years. I had very close-knit friends. I had close family. To then move entirely to a different country, because I'm from Northern Ireland, was a very disbalancing experience. That's probably not the right word, but it kind of threw me off kilter. And then to experience sexual misconduct, it was very hard to re-establish the trusting relationships that I'd had in order to feel that I had somebody to disclose to. And I think on a campus even more so, because you don't have that same intimate relationship you would have had with your sixth form teachers that you do with a lecturer a lot of the time. And the support that's available both on campus and then in the wider city might not be widely known or necessarily specialist to the needs that you're having at that time. A lot of university support services until very recently haven't had training specifically on these issues, so that has led to a lot of shall we say faux pas when it comes to the way that they have spoken to victims and survivors. Power imbalances that exist on campus, obviously both with those who are in older year groups, with younger students, and also the very contentious issue of staff and student relationships. If you are interested in that, I cannot recommend more though getting in touch with or looking at the work of 1752 group. They're amazing. Universities now, especially in the last decade, have started to function increasingly as a business and become more and more commercialised. And they do not want the reputation of a campus with a rape problem to kind of steal from a documentary called The Hunting Ground. The Hunting Ground looks at sexual violence in America, but I would recommend it strongly as data to look at for where our education system can move to with the increasing commercialisation, and it is quite concerning. Expectations around casual sex and pressure or coercion to engage with this. So this is something I think a lot of the time people don't want to talk about because we are in a time of sex positivity, and I think that's a really great thing. But I think we also have to acknowledge that for those who are new on campus, for those who aren't sexually experienced, that a lot of this can end up creating a sense of pressure on individuals, that then they find it harder to argue against people who might be coercive. And this is reflected in the statistic from Revolt sexual assault that 31% felt pressured into doing something sexual. Also, cultural ignorance throughout society. I'm going to kind of expand on that a bit later, so I will leave that for now. Why do universities avoid the truth? Like I said, business interests and reputational concerns. There's also a long history of the use of NDAs and other measures to cover up past incidents of sexual violence and domestic violence, and this has kind of created an almost Pandora's box situation where if they open the lid, it'll all just come streaming out. And some of this isn't their immediate failings, but their predecessors' failings, and so on. It becomes a culture of maintaining. Staff-student relationships can be common. In fact, some staff members will have established marital relationships and long-term relationships as a product of an originally a staff-student relationship. So this has been a very contentious issue for both that among many other reasons. There's obviously also the debate around being an adult and having your own autonomy to make these choices. And then cultural issues, so general ignorance among people in society, a lack of awareness of the realities of false reporting statistics, and actually that they are massively amplified beyond what is reasonable. A cultural inability to sympathise properly with victims, and instead to turn to victim blaming, particularly in these cases, and so on. So I'm going to touch a little bit on data that exists around different intersectional identities. So disabled students, disabled respondents were more likely than non-disabled students to report being negatively affected by unwanted behaviour in a number of ways. So these ways included being more significantly affected in their studies, more significantly affected financially, and so on, when compared with non-disabled counterparts. This is from the Sexual Violence and Further Education study done by the NUS. And then this is looking more widely at society as a whole. More than 1 in 3 people with mental illness have experienced domestic abuse in the last year, and 1 in 20 people with mental illness have experienced sexual violence in the last year. And this is from the Disability and Domestic Abuse study by gov.uk. Obviously, that's not looking directly at students, but as we all know, universities are kind of the microcosm of the wider, so it felt worth including. LGBTQ students, 36% of heterosexual respondents who'd been in a relationship had experienced threats or intimidation from their partners at least once, compared with 61% of lesbian or gay respondents reporting experiencing this, rising to 64% and 66% for bisexual and queer respondents, respectively, again from Sexual Violence and FE by NUS. They were also significantly more likely to have experienced all the unwanted sexual experiences described as rape. Sadly, there's a few groups here that I'm going to look at that just don't have specific data on this. In fact, most intersectional identities don't. It's only in the last, far as I can see, in the last 10 years that this data has actually started being collected, and there is steps needed to improve the data as it stands, and to kind of show more in more depth how these different identities are affected specifically by this on campus. This is never more amplified than with BAME students, so Black and Asian minority ethnic students. From all the studies that I looked through, this was the main section that talked about it, was from the Changing the Culture report, which looks both at hate crime and at sexual violence. They acknowledge that some women students are targeted for sexual harassment on the basis of their ethnicity, race and faith, with a focus on Black and minority ethnic women, which points to the fact that sexual violence for those of a BAME background can also be a hate crime. This is the case for most minority identities as well. But there is a glaring lack of data on Black and minority ethnic women's experiences of sexual violence, particularly as students. So this is an area that is in desperate need of improvement. Student sex workers, I did actually find a study for this, which was great. I was really pleased to find that. 65% have experienced harassment and 47% have experienced assault. More than 70% of the student sex workers identified as LGBTQ, and over 55% as having a disability. 71% were women and 17% were non-binary people. This, though not surprising given the original statistics around reporting, was sad to read. 48% of respondents said they felt uncomfortable going to the police if they experienced property theft, violence and sexual violence at the hands of clients and or management. The thing I really want to kind of amplify with this is not that I'm saying that people should trust these groups. I think people have very complicated backgrounds with the police and justice systems, but rather how sad it is and what a failing it is of the society as a whole that there are so many groups within our society that don't feel that they have that kind of recourse to justice. I think that's something, again, that really needs to be looked at, as I'm sure those of you who are working within the sector are more than aware. Other high-risk groups, this is not exhaustive, postgraduate and PhD students, so due to the power imbalances, again, see the 1752 group, international students due to cultural and religious variations, being far away from their family, not having access to public services if they're in that category that have no recourse to public funds, and general financial concerns that are mirrored within working class students. And further limiting factors are obviously cultural ignorance and lack of awareness of reporting procedures and access to support. I included this picture here as this happened in around September, October last year, and I think was a very good example of the kind of more nuanced issues that international students face. So these are the risk factors that you can have as an individual across most intersections. If you have a religious background, this is something that affects both people from all over the world, people with BAME, people from my background, from Northern Ireland, where if you experience sexual violence, you know that that has a component where your virginity or your chastity might be called into question. And obviously, if you come from a background where that is very prized, that adds a very deep emotional element to it. Private family, having a family that don't want you to speak up about these types of things. Distrust of police or the justice system, as I've touched on. Lack of support systems, cultural barriers, lack of housing alternatives, long distance from family and home, mental health or disability, and lack of specialised services. So this applies to all kind of minority groups. There's issues with non-accessible centres, like if you're deaf and there's no BSL interpreter therapists in your services, that's a big problem. Specific BAME services like Halo Project and so on. It can be quite difficult to find what you're actually needing if you belong to not just the cis white woman group. The microcosm, so each of these things in of themselves are a wide effect, but they can and do have an effect on campus themselves. So the legal system, rape decriminalised, only 1.4% of reported attacks are prosecuted in England and Wales. This is a huge problem because if justice isn't being served outside of campus, a lot of the time the campuses can turn their head a lot more easily to actually taking action on these particular situations. Media has a long history of victim blaming, as we've seen. Stanford swimmer's dad argues for 6-month sentence is too steep for 20 minutes of action. Even the fact we continue to call this individual the Stanford swimmer rather than their name is just part and parcel of the entire thing. The police system, it's been recently revealed that they aren't handing over enough cases to the CPS, and the CPS then isn't progressing them enough, so this is a multi-tiered issue. Lack of awareness, so societally there is a lack of understanding for the experiences that are had by survivors and kind of the variances of those experiences, and a misrepresentation of false reporting statistics. So for example, a lot of people seem to think rapists are predominantly strangers in alleyways, but we know that 90% of rape occurs by someone that you know or would know through someone else. So I wanted to quickly just show you all this video so you can get an idea for kind of an incident that occurred on campus a few years ago that I've mentioned. The Warwick rape chat kind of blew up quite a lot of the issues that we have been talking about for quite some time. So, yeah.
I hate women. I'm having an official month of disrespect.
BBC
Newsbeat.
Hashtag shame on you, Warwick.
New revelations about the Warwick University online rape case.
Sometimes it's fun to just go wild and rape 100 girls, rape the whole flat to teach them all a lesson.
I always wanted to go to Warwick. was my first choice, and I was really, really excited. Joining a chat group is really important because it gives you that sense of not being alone when you're starting university.
99% of the time they were just your normal university guys. We were kind of always aware that there was some like elusive like boys group chat. I'd sometimes ask like, oh, like, are you gonna let us see what you guys chat about us? And they're like, oh, you won't care, like it's just a football chat.
We were sat in my apartment and he had his laptop out. Yeah, he then proceeded to show me the lads group chat as if he was showing off.
I swear to God, if it's that girl in my flat, I'm going to go all 1945 advancing Soviet army on her and rape her in the street whilst everybody watches. Rape her and run. I think I would have disabled her. Ha ha ha. Knock her out, the stupid slut.
I get a phone call from her saying, you have to come over, like we found something, like you need to get here now. We'd sat there for about probably an hour at least, just looking through all these screenshots of these disgusting messages. One of the boys said, which girl at uni would you like to pin down the most? And I just remember reading that and seeing all of our names listed. These are men who you've put in such a position of trust and you hold in such high regard, but they make a game out of raping and sexually assaulting you.
Someone pulled us to one side and they said, oh, by the way, guys, there's this story happening. There's a group chat involving some students. You might want to take a look at it.
One of them, who I was especially close with, actually sent me a message saying, like, you can't let these screenshots get out because there's going to be severe consequences for all of us. Like, no one else can see this.
Yeah, I'm doing it.
I do remember actually trying to decide what screenshots to include in the actual story. We decided to choose the most horrific messages because for people to sort of understand the situation.
I felt like I should have said something, and I was so happy that someone was doing something at least. So whilst I didn't put a complaint forward, in the end I wrote a statement.
I think there was a sense of, okay, putting it to bed almost. Obviously there was still anger that this had happened in the first place.
No one in the administration or the people dealing with the case ever contacted me about this. Back then, no, I didn't feel like I was being heard. Having seen such horrific content like that, I don't understand how the university were willing to let these people return to campus.
It's the biggest story about Warwick in recent history. It kind of puts a cloud over the university. It's on their Wikipedia page now, so it's there for good.
We were completely objectified and sexualized to the point where it was almost a ranking system of which girl was more desirable to rape. And it still gets to me. It still does.
So that statement there, you can almost see it replicated across the sector when cases like these occur, which is quite frustrating a lot of the time, is seeing these kind of, we take these cases very seriously statements kind of accompanied by the same actions that often question the kind of validity of that. Sexual violence on campus over the last 2 years. This is not an exhaustive list again, but I've tried to put together a list of different campuses that have hit the media hard kind of over the last couple of years, but this is not exhaustive. And Russell Group University do receive more media attention when these cases occur, simply because people have more of an investment in these universities. So please take that into account. I won't go into each of these, but you're welcome to look them up for yourself as well, as looking them up on our news page at Not On My Campus UK. So here's some of the different ones. Okay, so ways of fighting back. After all that really depressing content, I kind of wanted to leave you guys with something a bit more cheerful. There is things you can do about this stuff, and there is ways to empower both yourselves and survivors on campus. So creating your own campus sexual violence groups or campaigns, start your own or join existing groups, getting in contact with local services like Halo Project or your local rape crisis, or Gallup, who work with LGBT people, or different groups basically to push these issues as needed. Legacy, I've put here, is essential to understanding the fight against sexual violence. There's no point remaking the wheel. A lot has been done, and you can learn from what's been done to know how effective it is and know how these things can come about to the point of change. You can run your own SU campaigns, and you can also collaborate locally and nationally, both within groups like Halo Hubs, It Happens Here groups, or through Not On My Campus UK as well. So this is my campaigning. I'm going to quickly touch on this before I leave you. I started Not On My Campus in 2019 officially, but have been working with it since 2018. I've worked with AVA and different organisations, consulting and speaking to try and improve procedures on campus. I ran This Is Not Consent with Madeline Ball and the wider It Happens team in response to the Cork rape trial, and we made underwear bunting. Ran Shame on Newcastle in response to the case of Jefferson Young being allowed back to campus while his victim was still studying. And the university, as a result of my campaigning, did produce several changes, including allowing students to appeal their process, ensuring student support throughout the reporting procedure, allowing students to actually find out what the result was of their reporting, because prior to this, if you made a report, you weren't allowed, due to GDPR, to find out the outcome of the disciplinary procedure. So there, some of the little successes that I have had in my time. I've really enjoyed campaigning, and I could not encourage it more. So for those of you who are considering getting more involved, I would strongly encourage that. But for now, I'm done, and I will hand back to Tamara, I think.
Thanks for that, Georgia. So if anybody does want any of the PowerPoint or to see anything further that Georgia was speaking about, just get in touch with us after, and we can make that available to you all today as well. Just a quick note as well before I bring on the next speaker. We are having some issues with our chat function. So if there is any questions that are coming up as you're going along, we will, during the Q&A, there'll be a chance for you to raise your hand and you can ask the question directly to our speakers, or alternatively, you can email the email address on the chat function there, which is nm@haloproject.org.uk. Okay, so next up we have Aishwarya. Aishwarya is a survivor and a final year student at Durham University, and she is coming on today to tell you about her experience and what she wants to happen as a result of that.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Aishwarya, a final year student at Durham University, and I'm here to share my experience on sexual harassment on campus. In my first year, a guy from my accommodation block entered my room drunk while I was asleep, and this was around 2 in the morning, and he just walked into my room and he tried to have sex with me. It was a very traumatizing experience, as I did not know how to reciprocate to the situation. I felt so uncomfortable in my own body and even guilty for not taking care of myself or protecting myself from such things happening. I felt that all of this happens only to me, and these experiences are probably not worth discussing in social circles, because A, no one ever talks about this, and B, all of this just seems to be normalized. But only when I opened up to my friends and the college about this, I realized how widespread the issue is. Almost all of the girls I know from university have been sexually harassed, whether it is being groped or inappropriately touched in nightclubs, bars, or even on campus, and being catcalled, slut shamed, and so on. This is quite common, and the fact that no one feels welcome to share such experiences. They often go unidentified and eventually normalized. And one of the reasons why this is so normalized is because people naturally assume boys will be boys, or people can't take a joke anymore, when in fact the things that they say are often demeaning and very disrespectful to both women and non-binary people. Clearly, these terms are just defense mechanisms for their actions, but this is accepted to be the norm. Another result of the lad culture in the UK is calling a woman a slut for having too much sex, or calling her prude for not engaging in any. I think this really creates an uncomfortable relationship for girls with their bodies. And it's sad to say that it's not just girls who are affected as a result of this, but also boys, as they are expected to fit into this hyper or toxic masculine standards of being a male. And a lot of my friends have also like called a guy to be nice on his own, but not so respectful when he's with his group of guy friends. And this just shows the high prevalence of lab culture in the UK, which I did not expect as an international student. To tackle these issues, I believe it is extremely important to be vocal about such experiences, so that we can create awareness. And by creating awareness, we can create a safe space for all girls at university. Campuses should also aim to create more support for survivors in terms of both mental and physical safety. Moreover, the matters or these reports by students should be taken seriously, and necessary procedures must be implemented to prevent future instances as such from happening. Halo hubs are a great way to reach out for support, advocacy, and guidance for victims facing sexual harassment. They've partnered with many UK universities, and they offer great support. So yeah, don't be afraid to seek support during difficult times, and make sure you take care of yourselves. Most importantly, don't blame yourself if you're a survivor, because you're definitely not alone in this, and you're not the reason this happened to you. And if possible, if you're comfortable, please aim to create awareness within social groups, with your friends, your family, so that we can prevent all of this from happening in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Shwaya. It was great to have you on today. We're definitely honoured to get to listen to your story there. So we're just going to get straight on with the next speaker now, as I'm aware we're running a bit behind at the minute. So next up we have Dr. Geetanjali Ganguly, who is the Associate Professor at Durham University in the Centre for Research in Violence and Abuse.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me here, and it's great pleasure to speak to everybody. Particularly want to sort of to thank Aishwarya for her courage in speaking out, and it is indeed through speaking out that we can end what's happening to us, because it gives hopefully courage to other survivors in speaking out as well. So I'm going to speak to you today about some research I've been doing on gender-based violence in higher education, and it's drawing from two different projects. I'm not going to go into details about the project, but I will put them in the chat with the web links for those of you who might be interested in following it up. But one of the projects in particular that we looked at, that I'm going to be drawing on a little bit more today for my presentation, we interviewed survivors of gender-based violence across the UK, asking about their experiences of gender-based violence, but also how they understood justice. So we also wanted to know what changes were possible. So we did about 261 interviews in total. But out of those interviews, the aim of those interviews were not specifically to look at university-based experiences or responses to gender-based violence, but as one of the previous speakers has rightly pointed out, the universities are a microcosm of society. And during analysis that we found that a subset of respondents, about 10 of them, had been in university during some of their experiences. One of them had been in university 20 years before the interview, so we removed her from the sample. What was interesting was, of course, we know the negative impact of sexual violence and gender-based violence on higher education. What we don't know is really that what it does to women in when they experience gender-based violence and then decide to enter higher education. So 7 out of 10 of our respondents decided to enter higher education as a response to or following experiences of gender-based violence. And when we analyzed the material more closely, we found that a number of the respondents had found that university services and structures had impacted on their previous experiences of gender-based violence, sexual violence, and abuse, but also that they also had new experiences during this time. So I suppose what I'm trying to say in a kind of roundabout way here is that sexual violence and other forms of gender-based violence are obviously endemic in society, but when students come to university, they also come with pre-existing experiences and having witnessed gender-based violence before that, and they carry the trauma of witnessing and experiencing those as well. And I believe that as universities, we have a duty of care not only to do preventative work, so we prevent more women experiencing sexual and gender-based violence while on campus from students, staff, or members of the public, but we also have a responsibility and a duty of care to support women on their journey during university to get over the gender-based violence they have experienced as well. So just briefly looking at my sample, as I said, what I'm going to talk about today is going to be drawn from 9 interviews. All but one participant was under the age of 30 at the time of the interview. The majority of them, 6 out of 9, were white British women. 1 was Indian and 2 were Pakistani, British Pakistani. So the 3 Black and minority ethnic women in our sample had also experienced gender-based violence linked with forced marriage and honor-based violence, abuse, as well as sexual violence. 8 women in our sample had experienced sexual violence and abuse. This was most commonly in the context of intimate partner abuse, and 1 had experienced sexual violence as a child. So the key findings is that there is obviously, and what we found was that intersections of ethnicity, immigration status, social class, and gender work together to advantage and disadvantage women in different ways. We found that financing of higher education by parents or partners in some cases was a way of controlling women suffering gender-based violence. This was particularly apparent in the 3 cases of gender-based violence we had from ethnic minority communities, where 1 respondent was being forced to marry, and and she was from another country, and her parents made a condition that they would finance her higher education in the UK only if she agreed to get married to the person they had chosen for her. So that links to the idea of educational sabotage, which is, I believe, a form of financial and emotional abuse, and it can also further restrict women's choices to escape parental abuse. In other cases, we have also found that women have chosen higher education as a who are choosing higher education, that can sometimes be a trigger for forced marriage and accompanying sexual violence that can take place within those communities. But I'm not going to go into a lot of detail unless somebody's interested in these specific cases of forced marriage. I'm happy to talk to people later, or if you have any questions, or you can get in touch with me independently. But one of the things we did find that for international students in general, they found it much harder to access support and welfare systems than British students. The first speaker talked about lack of, you know, resources in general for international students, but what women who were trying to, for instance, escape their families, if they had their finances cut off, they found it harder to stay in the country and get any other kind of support. So this one woman, for instance, said that if you're not a British citizen, I don't know how they can help you. They can't really do much because there aren't any legal laws in place for somebody who is not British. So they'll help them in this country, but there's nothing that anybody can do once you go away. There's also, of course, the issue that sometimes lack of minority women's lack of knowledge of cultural and familial situations means that at sometimes university responses were seen as problematic. So one woman who was forced to go on a date with, well, I suppose you call it a date with somebody who her parents were trying to arrange her marriage with. This person then sexually abused her during that uh, encounter. When she tried to talk to her college lecturers, she said that, she shared with them that they were going to marry them off, him off to somebody who had sexually harassed her. And she said, "You've got to help me." And this lecturer said, "Oh, that's really nice jumper you're wearing. Do you really want to go into a refuge or a home? You're not going to get this kind of jumper at a home. If you think you've had it bad, just wait till you get into a home." So those kind of responses, which can be very problematic, and I believe perhaps to some extent come from lack of training or lack of awareness of the realities of women's lives in different contexts. Some of the research on bystander intervention has indicated that survivors of sexual abuse and gender-based violence in general can feel supported and empowered when bystanders respond positively to incidents of abuse. I have certainly found that the case in my personal life, and I have been subjected to racial and sexualized abuse. If somebody speaks out for me, or even looks at me sympathetically, that can actually give you courage, if you like. But of course, the reverse happens when bystanders either do not respond or respond in a hostile and unfriendly way, unhelpful way. One of our respondents was sexually assaulted when she was traveling on public transport to her university, but nobody on her plane platform intervened. And she said she couldn't understand where somebody wouldn't run and get the police who were already in the station. And there were some people on the platform who she recognized as part of her university, but they still didn't help her. Survivors of sexual abuse can sometimes choose to disclose their experiences to friends and family members in the hope of achieving some sort of empathetic response. but negative or non-responses from family and friends can equally have a negative impact, and the survivors then get further silenced and isolated. So one of our respondents who was raped on a night out talked about how her friend basically stonewalled her experience. So she met after the rape, she was at an event that they were both at, and she told her friend that he did that to me, and she described what had happened. But the woman didn't speak up at all about it. She basically heard her and then never mentioned it again. And this respondent believes and said in her interview with me that she felt that the lack of response from her friend had led her to clam up for years about her experience. And following that, this had happened 5 to 6 years before the interview. She had only been able to talk about it for the first time with our interview team because she felt that her friend had completely blanked her experience or her, her, her disclosure. But when university peer groups and forums that are supported by the university play a really important role in enabling women to take action against gender-based violence. 3 of our respondents were very active in feminist debates and activism at their respective universities, and all of them attribute this to their experience of abuse. So they felt that they would not possibly have been that active if it hadn't been for the fact that they had experienced the abuse, and that the activism helped them to deal with the abuse, and they found that empowering. For instance, one of our respondents felt able to report her historic experience of sexual violence and abuse as a child to the police because of the support that her peer group in her university gave her. And she talks about, and in her words, I was on the university's sexual violence forum for 5 years, the year after I went to university. A police officer who came and spoke to us said, basically, you can report it any time. I was like, oh, right. So now I was much stronger and I rang up and reported it. I had a officer come round to go through it with me. She was absolutely brilliant. So in conclusion, I'm just going to end here because I really want to open it up for discussion. As I said before, victims and survivors come to universities with varied experiences of gender-based violence and sexual abuse. And those of you who, or those of us who are familiar with Liz Kelly's idea of the continuum, know how one form of violence and abuse can feed into another form of violence and abuse. But at the same time, perhaps university education can also be the point at which some women get the courage to come out of their experience and to even be able to transcend it. However, having said that, that can only happen if universities actively support women in that way, and don't just focus on preventative and responsive measures to existing cases of sexual and gender-based violence within the university. Of course, that's really important to do, but we do also need to know what has been going on in people's life before and offer them the support so that they can transcend that as well. I believe there is a lack of solid qualitative and quantitative data on both these aspects. We know there is a lot of sexual violence and other forms of gender-based violence that students are coming with. We know that there is a lot happening in campus. We know that these two things are related and there is a continuum in some form or the other, but we don't have the details of that. We don't have the details of ethnicity. We don't have the details of how sexuality might impact these specific experiences. So we need a lot more data collection. We also need much more training for university staff We need a lot of training for student mentors. So obviously the wonderful work that Halo is doing, but also for students, because research on domestic violence, I'm thinking about work done by people like Alison Gregory and others in the University of Bristol, where they talked about the role of friends within within domestic violence situations. People don't often talk about that very much, but those are the people you would need support, and they do need friends need a lot of support about how to actually talk to other members of the university or their peers when anybody actually is brave enough to disclose cases of gender-based violence and abuse. And I have to end here. I'll end here, but I also wanted to quickly apologize for the background sound you might have picked up while I was speaking. I have 2 children who are at home and are being home educated by my partner at the moment. And I think there's a little bit of argy-bargy going on there, but I'm pleased I'm not part of it anyway at the moment. So thank you very much. And I'm going to hand back to Tamara, I believe, to so she can pass on to the next speaker.
Yes, thanks, Geetanjali. Luckily, I don't think we heard any of that background noise there at all, so you're okay there. Thank you so much for that. So we're just going to go straight on to our next speaker then. So that is Hannah, and she is from Halo Hub in Durham University. She's a second-year undergraduate student studying law, and she's just going to tell you a bit about her time in the Hub now.
Hi. Okay, so the Durham Halo project has worked really hard this year to continue to raise awareness for the prevalent issues within our society, despite the ongoing lockdowns. Where previously we would be doing in-person events, we have now had to shift all of our activity online to our social media platforms. Our Instagram page has been the most useful, where we have hosted multiple Instagram live sessions, interviewing ex-team members and even our Halo founder, Yasmin. This was not only an insightful experience for us, but we've also managed to reach a pleasing number of viewers for each session, educating them on the ongoing issues around sexual violence, FGM, and survivors' ability to talk about their experiences. On top of this, we've completed another Instagram campaign on the 16 Days of Activism, where for 16 days in November and December, each of us in the team addressed a different issue within the scope of our focus. Some of these included domestic violence within the COVID-19 pandemic, a very new and relevant issue, long-term effects of domestic violence, and tips on how we can help. This provided our followers short and direct information on each of these issues to keep them engaged while continuing to educate them on various matters. So far, we've been really pleased with the reach that we've been able to produce in raising awareness for the Halo project. As a student body in a generation that spends more and more time on social media, we believe that we are well suited to raise awareness in this manner due to our, along with everyone else's, constant use. It is really pleasing to see that so much of this information is now so easily accessible to the student body in just a few clicks, which at the end of the day is something that we have always strived to achieve. With this, we'll be continuing to raise awareness through our social media platforms, as well as hosting some larger webinars and events within the next month, which we are all really excited about. To stay updated on our events and to see more of the work we are doing in Durham, follow our Instagram page at Durham Student Halo. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Like she just reiterated there, it goes for all of the hubs as well. If you want to stay updated on anything that they're doing right now, just look at their Instagram or their Twitter or their Facebook as well, which we can make available after this webinar. So next up we have Pintana. She's from Halo Hub Northumbria. She is a second-year undergraduate student in tourism and events management.
Hi everyone. My name is Pintana and I'm one of the newer members who have joined the Halo Hub this year at Northumbria. So we think it's really important for students and staff to learn about these issues that many might disregard as a thing that takes place in other countries, such as illegal cultural harms, FGM, and forced marriages. For the next 5 minutes, I'm going to briefly go over a timeline of what I'm going to talk about. So what we did as a hub last semester, what we're doing this week for Sexual Violence Awareness Week, and what the hub hopes to do in the future. So over the last semester, we managed to raise lots of awareness and get our members involved despite moving on to an online platform, which unfortunately really limited our physical events from taking place. So in November, the hub took part in the 16 Days of Activism, which started on the 25th of November, and we all posted on social media through Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, using various video messages from our members. This was a really great way to end the month and a way to get new members involved, such as myself, to share issues of violence against young women and girls around the university. In December, the hub also took part in the Big Give campaign, where all members took part in sharing posts again online and organising fundraisers. So we managed to raise £335 to go towards the Halo project after that. It was a little bit difficult organising this campaign and getting all of the videos together because it was online, but we think it was a really effective way of showing support and awareness for this subject. The hub also collaborated with societies last semester. We collaborated with the Primary Education Society and the Midwifery Society. So we felt that as future workers in that type of industry, it was really important for them to be aware of these potential issues that they might encounter in the future. The sessions were really great for being able to comfortably talk and discuss about these issues with one another. If they hadn't heard about these issues before, then they definitely have heard about it now. Then towards mid-November, we also had a guest speaker come from Ben Horbell Solicitors. And Chris McCurley specialises in working with victims of trafficking, and she's won a lot of awards for her work involving the Black and minority ethnic women and children. We invited the Grey Society at Northumbria to attend this event, and we saw about 23 attendees come, which was a really great number considering it was online. And she discussed her encounters and experiences with FGM and forced marriages in the UK. So she was really passionate about what she was talking about, and I feel like she really inspired people who might not have thought about working in that type of side of the law or industry. And she emailed us afterwards to say that she had a really great time and thank you for inviting her. And we got a lot of great feedback from that event from the rest of the Grey Society as well. And then all the way back in October, we did a skill swap with the Nightline Society. And they are basically a confidential listening service at Northumbria. So they gave us the opportunity to learn more about being approached by someone in trouble. And then we discussed with them what the Halo Hub does for the Halo project, whilst further raising awareness and sharing about these issues in the UK and the minority communities that they happen in. And then specifically for Sexual Violence Awareness Week, Northumbria Halo Hub are reminding students on campus where to go if they experience harassment, sexual violence and sexual abuse at the university. And then just to finish off, in the future, we really hope that we get the chance this year to organise a physical event, which might not happen, but we're very happy with the online events that we're organising right now, and we're getting a lot of attention from them, thankfully. We also hope to work with more societies and also engage with staff around the university to spread our message around even further. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Pintana. Okay, so last on today is Charlotte, who is a third-year undergrad studying religion, philosophy and ethics at York St John University.
Hiya, yeah, my name's Charlotte, and we brought YSJ Hub into action at the beginning of this last semester. I heard about it from Esther McIntosh, who teaches the feminist ethics module on my religion, philosophy and ethics course, and she raised some of the issues of FGM and forced marriage within that module, and then talked about the Halo project. And I knew I wanted to get involved, and I thought it would be a great thing to bring to YSJ. So we now have the hub at the university. We can't yet establish ourselves as a society because of coronavirus, but we operate as a student-led campaign with full support from the university and the Students' Union. We have regular meetings with the SU, the Women's Officer and President of Wellbeing and Diversity regarding working together to share awareness on campus and improve the services that are already available to students, staff and graduates. As project director, I've seen the positive impacts that the hub has brought to YSJ so far, and we're so thankful for the education, support and resources which Tamara and the Halo project as a whole have provided us with to start raising awareness at the university about issues such as the high prevalence of sexual violence. In the last few months, we've built a community of supportive student activists who want to make a change at the university and within the wider community. In our most recent meeting at the beginning of this Sexual Abuse and Sexual Violence Awareness Week, we discussed the services that the university already provides for students and how we can work with the uni to better the accessibility and support offered. And we intend to take this forward into the semester through our events, campaigns and monthly meetings. As I said before, we launched the YSJ Hub in late October, and since we've raised over £350 for the Halo project through a raffle, with the support of local small businesses who resonate with the message of the charity and wanting to get involved. Sabahat, our head of media, has been working hard to create engaging content on our social media pages, which has meant that despite the lockdowns and quarantining, we've been able to extend our message online, when perhaps it's most important to do so. The YSJ Hub is continually growing in size, which we feel reflects both the importance of the issues raised and the willingness of students to get involved with the fight against gender-based violence, honour-based violence and sexual violence, both on campus and in the wider community. Going forwards, we'll continue with our monthly meetings and be a part of the student voice in university and students' union discussions surrounding sexual abuse and sexual violence on campus, as well as continuing to raise awareness, signpost to support and educate students, staff and graduates about sexual violence, gender and honour-based violence and cultural harms. That's it from me. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Charlotte. So that concludes our speakers for today then, and we're now going to go into the Q&A, but just before we do, I just wanted to highlight that we are starting the Halo Hubs nationally right now, so if anybody watching today wants to get involved or wants some more information, then please just get in touch and we can provide that for you. I'm aware that our chat function also doesn't seem to be working at the moment as well. So if anyone does have any questions, then please just use the raise the hand function and we'll be able to unmute you and then you can go ahead and ask your question. So back to you now, Yasmin.
Okay, thank you very much, Tamara. Well, for such a short time, I think the quality of the panel today is absolutely amazing. Just to quickly summarise then, Georgia, the information that you've provided and your tireless work that you do across campuses in raising the issues that victims experience on sexual violence is absolutely amazing. I myself will personally take some of the material that you shared today and ensure that we can link other universities in, because I think it's a very lame excuse in 2021 to say things do not happen on our campus, and we have a very strong policy against that. What we find by speaking to victims and those at risk of sexual violence, that you can always prevent the abuse, just to ensure that people are, are brought to justice. And we've had some comments from the Crown Prosecution Service who really want to do something with universities. I mean, the 2% reporting is a huge worry, and we should all be concerned about that. Universities are there in a learning environment to ensure that they can study in safety. It's a human right. And what we need to do across universities and perhaps through the hubs is to ensure that people have a very clear message that this will not be tolerated, and you should always be able to report it. There should be no barriers for you. We've got to, as we've said in the Charter, we've got to raise the status for victims and put the onus on the perpetrators and those who commit such crimes. Secondly, Ashwari, what can I say? It's people like you who give us the strength and the determination to continue what we're doing and to listen to you, because we must listen to survivors and ensure that we can, we reflect the service by the things that you're telling us, and to tailor services. I'm a great believer that education and prevention go hand in hand. The more we use education and the peer support networks within universities, which are absolutely brilliant, we can make sure that we prevent sexual abuse from happening in the first instance, because surely that must be our common goal. And can I also raise the issue around the trauma that exists for victims, but also for those of us who know somebody very close to us, who have listened to the abuse. You know, we really do experience vicarious trauma, and we need to work collectively to support and ensure that wherever sexual violence is presented, we use that opportunity to get it right for those who've been affected. I think that's a very important point. Thank you so much, Aishwarya. I hope we can work in partnership in the future. You know, people with lived experience are always the best advocates in terms of making sure that their experiences can influence change. So I'm really keen to work with you. Dr. Gitanjali, thank you so much for your comprehensive academic input to this, because we need academics to validate the work that we do. We need academics like you to ensure that the information that you've been working on for absolute years is implemented in those change methodologies that we want to instill with the universities that we have working in our partnership, but also going forward. So thank you so much for your tireless work in the research that you've been doing. I'm aware of the work that you've done in university, when you looked at the outcomes for victims. It's not necessarily always a prosecution, so I remember the talk that you did there. Well done, Hannah, Pintana and Charlotte, for sharing your experience about what Halo Hub has brought to your university and the fantastic plans you've got for going forward. You know, we do not want to recreate a brand new structure within universities. We've got something that works with the Halo Hubs. It's tried, it's tested, and for me the biggest push is it's led by students, and that's absolutely key. We cannot, as an organisation, function and run university hubs without peer support, and by ensuring that the future leaders are involved in designing the programs for the academic year. So we'll be continuing to work with universities. Just to let you know, Durham was the first student hub that we had way back in 2017. I beg your pardon, 2015, and it's been successfully running. Obviously, you cannot see the back of my the posters on the back of our walls here at Halo HQ, but Durham University students have designed them. They're now being implemented and used by the Forced Marriage Unit, the FGM unit, national organisation, Welsh organisations. So you can really be part of a huge movement. So I want to respond to one of the questions, and I hopefully will be getting some more through. Do email Natalia if something hasn't come up. But I've been asked a question from a solicitor who works to support victims and bring together civil claims for victims of sexual abuse. And one of the questions she's asked is, sadly, there is a very disproportionate number of, there's a real underrepresentation from Black, minority and ethnic communities, as well as LGBT communities. And why is that the case? There is a lack of awareness. I think once victims have experienced sexual abuse, probably the last thing on their mind would be to look at alternative recourse to justice. And perhaps there's a lack of awareness of what's currently available out there. So it'd be really good to share this information with all the delegates that have signed up today. And I've often spoken to victims, and one of the things that we've got to be very mindful of is re-traumatization. So once they've actually have disclosed the information, it really is for those professionals to then take forward that information and do something about it. To ask a victim to go through their experience 4 times is traumatizing them 4 times. So please bear that in mind. But certainly the advocates who represent and hear about those stories are the ones that can take forward and feed in the information. A range of services are available for support, and we need to make sure that we can share that information so the right service is being provided. And I always say this, and this is one of the guidelines for forced marriages in the national guidance that the Home Office have produced. You may have that one opportunity. Somebody may come to you, instilling their trust and in the hope that some action will be taken, because victims should never have to navigate their way through services. Services should be available to victims. So if you have got that one opportunity to help somebody, work with those agencies that can support them, because that might be their one chance rule, and we need to make sure that we get that response right the first time. So that's really important. So I always believe in the 2 P's. Prevention is absolutely important, but protection is equally important. And I think the universities are so well placed with the hubs and with advocates. Georgia, we'd love to work with you on joint initiatives, and Aishwarya, we'd love to work with you too, as we would with all of our speakers. But on the panel now, I just wonder if anybody has any additional questions, or if the panelists would like to say something finally, rather than listen to my boring voice. If panelists would like to say something, then please put your camera on or raise your hands. So, okay, we've got Charlotte. Oh no, we haven't. Sorry. It's, you know, I'll let the professionals. Geetanjali, do you want to say something? I'll mute myself.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on the point that you just made about Black and minority ethnic people from Black and minority ethnic groups and why they might not report. I think that's some of the issues you raised are really important. Some of the work we've done also indicates that there is a difference between first and second generation immigrant populations in general, and I imagine that would make a huge difference with students. I mean, I've been reading reports recently, and I think that was covered by the Channel 4 News as well, about international students during the pandemic and the lockdowns actually struggling for food because they're not able to work because of immigration restrictions, and of course the lack of work which is available in the kind of areas they might have been able to work in as well. And of course that puts a lot more pressure and vulnerability on international students, but also there are of course issues around sort of cultural differences, and I always hesitate to use the word culture when I'm speaking about Black and minority ethnic communities, because it's not as if only people from Black and minority ethnic communities have culture. We all do. You know, it's something shared, but the specific aspects around sort of silencing being immigrants and the social pressures around that could feasibly also lead to ways why perhaps second generation immigrants who might be going to universities would find it really hard to speak up about their experiences. It's hard enough in some cases for women from particular ethnic groups and ethnic minority groups, depending on their class positions, of course, to enter university. And then to enter university, I've had experiences of sexual violence, sexual harassment, and then to speak up when they would be rightly worried that their speaking up would put a spotlight on them and may lead to their families withdrawing support. It is a big risk to take.
Thank you very much for that. That's really interesting. We do actually have a couple of questions. So if we can go to Joanna first and then Maya, over to you. Joanna,
hi, hello. Hi. Hello, can you hear
Hello.
me? Firstly, thank you very much to everyone that's presented and taken part. I had really sort of two observations. One was there was very little mention of men as the overwhelming perpetrators, and two, my other observation was that maybe we need to be preparing young people, boys and girls, who are going into higher education before they get there. You know, because listening to the young woman who told her story, I was very aware that she didn't seem, you know, she didn't know where to go with this. So perhaps that's something that Halo Hubs or Rape Crisis, any other agency, you know, working together, could do. At the moment, I know it's difficult, But I think by all the changes that young people go through going into university, there needs to be space for them to do, to have some information before they get there. I'd like to know what anyone else thought.
Yeah, I'll just pick that up if I can do. I think you're absolutely right. And I think there has to be the recognition that majority of perpetrators are in fact male. And one would assume when we are working in that environment that that's a given, but it's a very important point to clarify and make. So thank you for making that, because there is there's a perception sometimes. Of course we have male victims, of course we do, but the majority of the victims are always female. So that's a very important question and a very important point that you made. In terms of your second point, in terms of what I mentioned earlier, is you're absolutely right. There is really an expectation that victims are navigating their way to find out what services are available and how they go about actually reporting the crime. Now, I know in all university there's student safeguarding officers and welfare officers, but actually when you've experienced the incident, you don't automatically need to speak to them. It should be a very clear pathway within universities. There's a zero tolerance around sexual violence. This is what you can be provided with in terms of support, and this is our stance on it, not just a policy or a procedure. So yes, absolutely, there needs to be more done. But I speaking to survivors in education and non-education settings, they have really had to know who to contact. And when all employers have a public duty to protect, it really should be their responsibility to ensure that the university is a place of safety. And I know Georgia really wants to come in to this question.
I just kind of wanted to add to the information that you've given as well. It's just when it comes to campuses trying to educate on these things, a lot of the time, from my experience, we've seen the introduction of things like consent classes. But these things are happening without kind of contextually looking at what's happening in high schools. So we were using the T video on my campus, which has been introduced to high school students now for the last few years. So it's become almost like an inside joke that's used to not actually take serious account for the situation. And instead of having talks about where to access that kind of reporting support, it is sort of looking at things like the T video that is more of a palatable way of discussing these things, instead of often trying to look at it more in a focused way. I think the one thing I would say is, especially in Northern Ireland, and I know in different areas of England and the wider UK as well, there is a big pushback against any form of sexual education. And this is a huge barrier to trying to have these conversations about where to go for support, where to report, how to report, when the conversation, bluntly as it is, like the word rape doesn't even enter the conversation. So I think I completely agree, this is a conversation that needs to be being had long term. I think consent video, like the consent as T video, is what we should be using in primary schools, and low key stage 3, so early years of high school, and then progressing into those more visceral understandings and more nuanced understandings as we get older, instead of spoon feeding university students very basic information instead of the accurate information that they're seeking about where to report and where to get help. Because sadly, the overwhelming impression I got on my campus was the vast majority of people do not know where to go or what to do in these situations. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to add. Apologies.
Thank you.
Thank you, Georgia. Can we just bring in Maya and then Sham? I'd like to ask you a question. So Maya first and then Sham. Maya, are you on mute? I think we'll go to Sham and then we'll come back to Maya. Sham, it's over to you. Hi.
Okay. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hi. I'm Sian Vining. I work at the Welsh Government. I'd like to ask how many Halo hubs are already operating in Welsh universities? And I'd also like to ask Geethanjali if I could get in touch with her outside this webinar, please.
Right, I'll just quickly answer because it's very easy for me to answer. There are no universities currently in Wales, and that doesn't mean to say that we can't approach Cardiff or the large universities to explore the relevance and the relevance of the implementation of a Halo Hub. They're very easy to be set up. We have training and toolkits, etc. So Sharma can pick that up with you outside the school, and I'll let you speak now.
Hi, Geethanjali. I'm just so desperate for information on Black and ethnic and Asian and ethnic minority communities. So I would really like to be able to contact you outside of the webinar, if that's okay.
Yes, definitely. I don't know if you have my contact details. I can put them in the chat for you if you like.
Okay, then. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Sham. Maya, over to you now. I don't know if your mic's working. Would you like to put your question in the chat if it's working, or email nm@haloproject.org.uk? Okay, Heather, we'll just go to you while we'll see if Maya can email us a question. So over to Heather. Isn't that the best stain of the pandemic? Heather, do you have your mic on?
Hello?
Hi.
Hi. Sorry, at last I was tapping everything. Hi. First of all, thank you, everyone. It's been really interesting. Thanks for everyone's experience. I really appreciate your time and effort you've done on this today. It's been fantastic to listen to and really inspiring. I actually live in Cardiff and I work as an IRIS worker. So I work with Cardiff and Vale University Health Board with all the domestic abuse within the GP services training. I'm also taking on a role soon as a sessional worker with Cardiff University. So that's actually why I was very interested to hear about the Halo project and everything that's happening to students. And I would like to say if I can get some extra kind of information, I'd like to link up with people, because when I do that post, which hopefully happening next month, I'd really like to be part of setting up this a Halo Hub within Cardiff University. So if anyone can link up with me, I'd be really grateful.
Heather, that is music to my ears. Thank you. We'd love to look at how we can extend Halo Hubs in Wales. I mean, they've been going on for 6 years now, and you know the traction that we've engaged and the topics that we've covered. We've even made inroads for police to work more effectively within the universities, and also about particular cases through the Crown Prosecution Service. So absolutely, Heather, you know that I work in Wales. You can contact the Halo Hub. You can contact Tamara, and she'll put her email in the chat box. But delighted to extend the Halo Hubs in Wales. And I think we're going to go to Maya. Maya, are you able to join us? Yeah. Yeah, there's a few questions I'll pick up, see if I can pick up as well. So, yeah, I mean, the issues for LGBT communities around how to report sexual abuse, harassment, the support agencies, the referral pathways are much to be desired. And it's really important that we look at all communities with all backgrounds. I mean, the university have a public sector equality duty, and they have to ensure that they meet the needs of all communities. So that's something that we would be really keen to see, if there's any good practice that we can draw upon from other universities. So that'd be something we can pick up, and we've got your email to ensure that we can include you in any kind of awareness that we're aware of. Okay, so it seems that yeah, the term gender-based violence, and it seems to be some particular universities in no particular order do focus on the gender-based violence, and you can have two schools of thought here. Gender-based violence is exactly as it says. It's gender-based violence is to ensure crimes and abuse against particular genders is disproportionate, as we know. Majority of perpetrators are male, majority of the victims are female. But there really needs to be a lot more work done around, the domestic abuse, the sexual abuse. We haven't even spoken about the online abuse that occurs. So sometimes I think some universities and institutions do actually get hooked on the issue around gender-based violence and gender-based equality. So it's very important to recognise the very complexities within gender-based violence, and that it's not a one-size-fits-all, and it's very important to recognise those differences in the variant of the abuse that occurs. So I think it's very important to consider that. And there is a word, but the actions behind that should mean more than just one word. So I'm all up for doing something. So Maya, we've just had your email. I do apologise for the technical issues that you may have heard or may have experienced. Sorry. So it's just about emailing. I'm really sorry to hear about what happened to you, and I really want to ensure that we can speak to you outside of this meeting and look at how we can support you, because as I've advocated throughout the seminar this afternoon, we must bring perpetrators to account. I think not only does that is just a basic human right, I also feel it sends a very strong message of deterrence to others who perpetrate such crimes. So I would like to pick this up with you outside of this meeting, if that's okay. But thank you so much for sharing with me, because, if anything, this event should not only instill confidence that there is work being done, but the report that headlined this webinar just tells us the scale of the work that's yet to do. So we can only do this collectively, which brings me really nicely to again thank all of you, all of those who asked questions, my colleagues Shannon, Tamara and Natalia, by the way, all from the university hubs. So they do actually come with so much experience, and we're looking to work on the employment route way for a bigger project at the end of the year. But these are all our students who've come and now are the best advocates to work for us. So they're the ones who are keeping the Halo hubs in doing the work that they're doing. So thank you so much for them. Thank you to all the speakers. I myself have personally learned so much more, and it's given me the inspiration to ensure that we continue to do this work. And as such, what I'd really like to present today is if we can get it on the screen, is what we wanted to do is try to ensure that we keep this conversation alive, that we bring perpetrators to justice, and we ensure every university understands the scale of the problem within their campuses and their institutions, and why we need to do more. And when I say we, I mean all of the partners on the call today. So in leading up to the International Women's Day, what we've done is created a Halo Hub Charter, which is self-explanatory. But what we're asking you today is think about the organisation or the university or who you stand for in terms of your representation today. Would you like to sign up to the Halo Hub Charter, which is really ensuring that university charter will ensure leadership, support and action is taken to eradicate all forms of sexual violence and harassment? And we'll be launching this on the 8th of March, which is International Women's Day. But before that, we're going to have one partner Halo Hub Charter and a university Halo Hub Charter, so that you can all be involved. It's not restricted to universities. It's about creating those partnerships that can support individuals who come forward. But basically what we want to do is to provide the very strong leadership that's required to combat and eradicate sexual abuse on the campuses and in that learning environment. We will create an environment of safety and support for all of those affected. We want to be appointing sexual abuse ambassadors and create pathways so that people know that there is support within the universities, and we want to do that and create that through the Halo hubs that we've created across Northumbria, Sunderland, Teesside and Durham and York St John. How can I forget them? And we also want to ensure that we create, as far as possible, a zero tolerance approach to sexual abuse, and ensuring that those who have been affected by abuse are supported. So if you're up for joining us on this brilliant initiative led by students, then please let us know. Contact us at info@haloproject.org.uk, and we will ensure that this charter includes your signature or your organisation's signature. Let's launch this on International Women's Day on March the 8th. So please join us in doing so. The charter's on the screen now. Have a look at it and see how you can get involved. We've run over, I would expect us to. There's so much still yet to discuss. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, sharing your knowledge and your expertise. Thank you for those who had the opportunity to ask a question. I can only apologise for the technical issues around the chat function. That doesn't mean to say we cannot send the questions out to any of the speakers. Thank you so much, Georgia. It's been absolutely insightful, the information that you have and the work that you're doing personally to eradicate sexual abuse. And thank you so much, Geetanjali. Your experience and your research is absolutely fantastic, and I know about your work that you've been doing. And Tamara, thank you for chairing this. Thank you for Hannah, Pintana and Charlotte. Thank you all for being involved. Get involved, sign up to the charter, and don't forget donations are still being accepted. I had to say that at the end. If you text Halo Project to 70085. All that remains is to thank you all for listening and signing up for the webinar. Watch this space. If you want to get involved, please get in touch, because you can be part of that change. So thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.